That's wonderful, Todd. Brian, I appreciate that. At this point, what I'd like to do is pass the host baton over to Bill, and we'll go into the kind of the 3 questions that I teed up for the steering committee about the next steps in terms of communications and outreach, about the messaging of that, and Matt can brief you on that. And then, of course, that issue of the possible next steps or expansions on both the interagency agreement with ecosystem services and on the flow alterations, the environmental flows work that Brian and Todd presented. So, Bill?
Gene, thanks. Thank you, Gene. I unfortunately am going to have to sign off. I got to run to another meeting. I
apologize. So I'll go ahead and...
We talked about that yesterday. I'm sorry to have to just run it back to you.
Back to you. I appreciate that. So let me just stop for a moment before I ask Matt to talk to us about the next steps in terms of our rollout. Ask if there are any clarifying questions, Lars or Todd and Brian. Again, the purpose is not really to evaluate the research per se, but to make sure that you understand what the product is and its capacity, that you as the steering committee can evaluate how we present that to our partners and to decision makers. So are there any clarifying questions in terms of the presentation that was given? And if you would just go ahead and tell me, who's asking the question and who's directed to.
Let me throw one out for consideration. I'm not sure which presenters should be answering this, but I'll ask it about both presentations. If we're putting this out there as an LCC, we're giving it sort of a stamp of approval. And I guess if I'm not technically qualified to evaluate the quality of the research, I guess the question that I would ask is, are these products we can stand behind from a peer review standpoint, or is that a set of considerations that we need to look into further?
I'll start just from the LCC perspective, and then of course pass it over to the PIs. Dan, if you'll remember, on all of our grants have a technical oversight team, which is uniquely constituted and it's based on the technical competencies of the reviewers and the technical needs of the study. So as an ongoing quarterly basis to review progress, interpretations, methodologies, interpretations, we have a team, generally 3 to 5 people. Again, they're uniquely constituted, so I can't tell you exactly who's who, but that is part of what we do as our business model for all of our research. So that's in part how the LCC is doing it for the cooperative in terms of the oversight. And I know that Brian and Mars are both in the scientific publishing part of that discussion as well. So I'll pass it back to the PIs to respond if they wish.
Yeah, this is Lars. I could just step in real briefly here. So just to tell you kind of what our general approach here is, from the very beginning, we definitely try to reach out to as many partners, collaborators, et cetera, as we can to be not sort of just reporting at the end, but also getting feedback from the very beginning in terms of, the sort of best practices in terms of our science. So we've done that with multiple groups all along in the past couple of years as we've been, well, year and a half as we've been working. And we feel like that's, made the science better in some very, very material ways. And then, of course, we try to stay in lockstep with the LCC's process that Gene just described, and be available to deliver as much information in terms of reporting as we can for that process. And then you mentioned the peer review process as well, or sort of that as a kind of a gold standard. And of course, as researchers, we're always involved in aiming to publish the work that we're doing in peer-reviewed journals that are appropriate for the kind of science we're doing, and that's something, multiple manuscripts in process underway right now. So those will be forthcoming as the project moves forward.
And from our end, this is Brian, by the way, and then I'll let Todd add some stuff should he see the need. But essentially, where we're at with the peer review process is we've already had, we've submitted the paper which summarizes a lot of the findings that are in the report and adds some additional analyses. We submitted that to ecological applications, which is a pretty good journal, and it's now been reviewed multiple times by two pretty thorough reviewers. In fact, I've probably not gotten so many comments on any paper, so I think that shows that they're interested in the subject and think that there's some promise there. We've had some pretty productive, essentially conversations with these reviewers, and it's on to the final stages. The last round of edits I did consisted of two very minor, essentially copy editing issues. So that, it's not officially accepted, but it's certainly been peer reviewed, and I'm expecting to hear back pretty much any day now. So that kind of gives you an update where we're at in terms of the peer review process. I don't know if Todd, you wanted to add.
Yeah, so I think for all essential purposes, it has been officially approved. They've taken our responses to the peer reviews, and now the editor is just simply working with us sort of one-on-one for clarification. I don't think it's going out for any more peer review. And I would also emphasize Brian's comment that the reviewers really were engaged with this. They found this very interesting and gave us lots of feedback to help us clarify. Because it is, as you saw even from our presentation, it's a very complicated process to get from where we started to where we are now. And I'd also like to emphasize, and this is really a hats off to Matt and Gene and the whole AppLCC. This was a process in which we started down one pathway, and we had to sort of keep revising our approach to it as we hit roadblocks. And so we were kind of more or less constantly engaged with the LCC about how we wanted to continually change our approach to get a better and better product. And Gene and Matt were very gracious in accommodating us to let us deviate from what our original plans were to get to where we are.
Thanks. I appreciate everyone's back. Again, is there any, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and switch over because in the interest of time, anyone that wants to stay on, let me mention two things. If we did do a roll call if you came in late, if you could just go ahead and shoot me an email, or if you are on at the end, I can add that as well. But again, there's the three things that we're talking to you about, our next steps and the outreach, and that's what I'm going to pass it over to Matt to make sure that the steering committee knows what those steps are, and that the steering committee is approving of that. Matt?
Yeah, so I'll be really quick on this. So for the ecosystem benefits and services research project, we did our public release last week. It was a joint release with the U.S. Forest Service Eastern Threats Center, Eastern Forest Environmental Threat Assessment Center out of Asheville. And we sent it out to 715 of our own contacts. The Forest Service sent it out to theirs, and we posted it to a variety of website. All the content was jointly developed between us, the Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife Service, and really good responses, especially from organizations like the EPA, USGS, and the Northeast Climate Hub, who want to use it in the future kind of meeting they're going to in the summer. So there's been just really good response about that, about just getting the awareness out regarding the ecosystem benefits and risks research and website. And I'm doing analytics now on the website to get an assessment of how many people have visited it, and should have numbers by next week. In terms of the stream impacts research, this was we developed a communication team with Cornell and the Fish and Wildlife Service to develop key messages and talking points on this kind of sensitive, subject matter. And that's been vetted by several steering committee members, as well as people within Fish and Wildlife Service and Cornell. And we have really good, pretty much final talking points that I sent out to the steering committee yesterday. So it gives you a better idea of kind of the key messages we're framing this research around, which are kind of the stream impacts from general water withdrawals, looking at hydrofracking in particular, and those impacts to aquatic organisms, but with the overall goal of providing recommendations that balance both human energy water needs and biological water needs in this region. So along with doing the briefing to the steering committee, which we've done here, we also selected key organizations that aren't on our steering committee, state DEPs in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and organizations like the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, the Chesapeake Bay Program, the Potomac Interstate Commission, and the Delaware River Basin Commission, to kind of just do a heads up, letting them know about this research and a public outreach that we'll do later in the summer. And basically it's to get feedback, does this kind of make sense to you? Is there any messaging that is that we need to tinker a bit before we do a public outreach to a greater community, things of that sort. And so obviously I'm sure most people on this call are looking at these messages for the first time, and so if there is any input you have, I mean, certainly you can say it on this call, but also feel free to email me in the weeks ahead. Obviously the communication team, which is composed of AppLCC, Cornell, Fish and Wildlife Service, will be incorporating edits and comments into further outreach products that we do from this research as we prepare for a more public general release like we did research. Jean, that's kind of my spiel for now.
Thank you, Matt. I know that we are about to hit our hour and the 11, and so I wanted to do a couple things because of the fact we have lost some of our discussion time. Those questions and the things that Matt just mentioned, we will follow up with everyone. Again, if you came in late and or not on the roll call, please send me an email so we include you on that. We will send out a email that asks for your feedback in terms of the communication, the strategy, the messaging, and then I will ask you in that email to also weigh in on your impression of the research in terms of how the researchers have framed possible next steps. And so generally how that's handled is if the full steering committee thinks a research interest is warranted, then you have been previously handing that over to the executive committee to follow up with nuts and bolts and clarification. So I will be asking whether or not you think it's appropriate to investigate that, and if you are comfortable with allowing the executives to do that on your behalf. So just in one more thing, in your email you have two things that are brought up. Number one is to ask you about going on and reserving your rooms for the July meeting, but also July 1st, Paul Leonard will be giving a briefing to the full steering committee, again, to talk about the modeling, and that's part of the preparation for the July in-person meeting. So again, if you to look at that email from Matt, it actually has those 3 contents. So because of the lateness of the hour, I'm just going to ask, are there any questions? If anyone is able to stay on, we're happy to continue the dialogue while we have the researchers. Do we have any questions? And if not, then I'm going to ask anyone that came in late after the roll call, if you can just announce yourself. That might save us sending an email.
Hi, Gene. This is Scott Schwank with North Atlantic LCC.
Hey, Scott. Thanks so much.
This is John Ambrose with Georgia DNR.
Oh, John, thanks so much.
Hey.
Okay. Well, I hope the others are able to do that. So again, I appreciate everyone's time and tolerance of our technology that we're living with, but I appreciate everyone's time and input, and we'll continue that dialogue through our email exchange. Thank you, Todd, Brian.
Thank you, Gene.
Lars,
Thank you.
Appreciate everything, and thanks, Jessica, for
Have a good weekend
as well.
Yep. Happy Friday.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, all.
Bye.